Right. One more thing to do before we can close the book on Oligopoly. Actually, there's one other thing. Just a little bit more fun playing off the last video about uh, that Beautiful Mind bar scene. One other thing that they got wrong that might be of interest. I alluded to the fact that it wasn't a prisoner's dilemma that was being set up. It's a different game entirely. I don't think there's a name for it, but one of the things that the great Stefan Kroll had us do in our class was solve for the actual equilibrium outcome in that game, which is not for everyone to go for the brunettes and for no one to go for the blonde. We first solved it in a very simple 2x2 format. Then we had to solve it for more people, and then we had to show mathematically that it would work for any number of brunettes and just one blonde. And it turns out the equilibrium outcome that one would expect is the outcome that was alluded to jokingly, where uh, the guy who later on became the president of Princeton University, but he doesn't actually exist in real life. He was an invented character for the movie. When he said to Nash that, Nash, if this is your plan to get the blonde for yourself, you can go to hell. I don't think the producers of the movie knew this when they put that line of dialogue in. It was just to make the scene a bit more fun. But that's actually the equilibrium. The equilibrium outcome is for one and only one player to pick the blonde, while everybody else goes for the brunette. Again, we're assuming the blondes are better. Not the assumption I make married to brunette, but if assuming for the sake of the exercise that blondes are better. If that assumption is made, if everybody goes for the brunette, given what other players do, remember the definition of Nash equilibrium, given what the other players are doing, every player has an incentive to switch to the blonde because nobody's going for her. If you assume that one player is gonna get the blonde. So if everybody going for the blonde isn't the equilibrium, everybody going for a brunette isn't the equilibrium. Instead, everybody going for a brunette except for one person. That's the real equilibrium. Not prisoner's dilemma, but that's actually how it works out. So another little thing you can do if you're ever in a situation where you need to get all smarmy and saying, well, actually, the real equilibrium in that game. Now you know. Anyway. What do we have here? Tit for tat and Grim Reaper. What does all of this mean? Well, remember how I pointed out that 40 million for both firms is something that we see in real life. We will see oligopolists behave as monopolists without any hint of collusion. Maybe they're colluding behind the scenes, but there are also reasons to believe that in a lot of these cases there is no illegal behavior going on. There's just, it's how the game works out. So what economists do with game theory is they'll get college students usually into the lab and have them play these games and see what the outcomes are. And then you get some of those journal articles like I mentioned where you have the 10 times the game theory. When we solve it as economists, we predicted exactly what people would do, and then 10 times when we don't predict correctly. And you have people play the game and see what emerges. So Prisoner's Dilemma is something that has so many different people have brought people in to play the Prisoner's Dilemma game with different payoff structures and different scenarios to try and see if they can get people to do things a little bit differently. And a lot of different results can happen if you play around with things. So while there are a lot of ways in which you will see that mutually beneficial outcome come about, where the social optimum, as it's called, even if that's not the equilibrium, tit for tat is probably the most prominent one. It says here, match the other player's strategy from the previous round. What this means is you're playing the game and you're told that you're going to play multiple times. You're not told how many times, and that's important. We'll get to that. But you have two players. One of the players, oftentimes when researchers bring you into the lab, there'll be one person who's in cahoots with the researchers, but they're a confederate is what it's called. But the other participants think that they're just another college student who came in for an extra $20 or whatever you're being paid. What those of you who are going to go to the university level, look for these studies. It's a good way to make a little bit of, you can't really make a living on it, but you can make a little bit of extra money being a test subject for various professors in various departments running various studies on people. They're very safe. They're usually in the social sciences. They need to see how people react to things. And you're helping them with their research, and it's great. You get paid to help people do their research. Anyway, what will often happen, or what has often happened, is one of the players who poses as just a regular old college student who isn't in on the whole thing is going to be a tit-for-tat player. So the very first round, they're going to choose the cooperate outcome, the everyone price high outcome, the one where everybody wins. That's going to be their choice. And then they'll see what the other person did. At the end of the round, you see what the other person did. If the other person chose to cooperate, then the tit-for-tat player continues to choose to cooperate until the other player chooses to defect and try to get that 50 million and stick the tit-for-tat player with -5. What'll happen then is the tit-for-tat player will defect in the next round. Whatever you did in the last round, the tit-for-tat player, will do it in the next round. Which means if you screwed me over and left me with -5 in the last round, then I'm going to leave you with -5 eventually if you want me to cooperate again. You basically have to take the punishment. Once you do, once you show you're ready to cooperate again, in the next round, I will cooperate. So if the other player figures it out, that they're playing with someone who's going to do exactly what they did in the previous round, even if you don't tell them, what often happens is they will start playing the cooperate strategy every single time. You tweak the payoffs a little bit, you might get some different outcomes, but generally speaking, tit for tat is a strategy that actually emerges in a lot of scenarios just naturally. Other times you'll see people just do the all defect and everybody gets 0. But if somebody is going to be a tit for tat player and do that strategy all the time, then a lot of other people come too and say, you know what, we're going to get more points overall if we all work together and do the all cooperate. And sometimes if people are, you get a certain amount of money, but that money will grow. Whatever you get in this game, you get to keep the money. So people see the money they get to walk out of the lab with grow as they play all cooperate with the tit for tat player. So that's one way to do it. The other one here, Grim Reaper. There are other things like Trembling Hand, which is like Grim Reaper. I only cover these two. Grim Reaper is sort of a I'm never going to forgive you strategy. It's like tit for tat. The Grim Reaper starts out playing cooperate every time. But the minute the other player defects, the Grim Reaper will never cooperate again. And this is one where you're usually told this is what the other player is going to play. How are you going to respond? People will often just say, okay, I'm cooperating. I'm not playing around. I'm not going for the -5 at all because then we got zeros the rest of the time. I want to make as much money as possible, so I'm going to cooperate every time. Both of these strategies have resulted, when set up properly, when the payoffs are right, etc., in players cooperating for every round. But remember I said they can't know when that last round is. It's basically only in an infinitely repeated game. And an infinitely repeated game is infinite if you don't know what the last round is. It's kind of like being an infinitely repeated game. So oligopolist firms who don't know when the other firm's going to go out of business or the market's going to change or whatever, they don't know when that last round of decision making about pricing or whatever is, they will oftentimes play the all cooperate if they believe they're playing with firms who are going to cooperate as well, and then they see that the other firm does. Nobody wants to rock the boat, and you end up with tacit collusion. There's that term again that I promised to come back to in I believe the very first video. It's called tacit collusion because nobody picked up the phone and did anything illegal, but the firms still found a way to cooperate without being able to send any signals to each other. But we've seen where firms, one of them stops cooperating and then they compete forevermore. And we've seen where cooperation breaks down and price wars, as they're called, come about. But then new leadership comes in and they're able to build it back up to where everybody's cooperating again. So those are kind of the real life scenario versions of these. But what happens if that terminal round is known? Well, think about what happens in the terminal round. If you know that this current round is the last round, you're in the last round, what are you going to do? You have a tit for tat player. You cooperate in the last round, so they're going to cooperate in this round. It's the last round. Get your 50 million, right? Or the Grim Reaper player, you still get the 50 million. There are no rounds after this. So in the last round, it doesn't work. But what about the next to last round? Well, in the next to last round, remember, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Everybody knows what the payoffs are. So the tit for tat player is going to know that you're going to screw them in the last round. And you know they're going to know. So you may as well screw them in the next to last round. Because the tit for tat player is just going to do the all defect in the very last round. Because they know. They know you're going to screw them. There's no reason to be a tit for tat anymore. Same thing with Grim Reaper. So in the next to last round, you may as well defect there and get your 50 million. But in the next to last round, you know, and so does the other player, that everybody's going to screw and it just keeps going. That's what we mean by the game unraveling all the way back to the first round. Now, again, this is in the world of theory, of rational actors knowing what the other one would do if they are a rational player in the strict economic sense of rationality. This is not necessarily what emerges in the laboratory, though it often does. There are also discount rates that would go in. Discount meaning you're discounting future production that would have to be factored in if we know a discount rate, but that gets into more advanced stuff that we don't do in this class. So again, we just say the terminal round is not known, and you have a tit for tat or a Grim Reaper player, and the other player knows that that's the kind of player they're dealing with, then you can get cooperation in this game. If the terminal round is known, then a rational player is never going to cooperate. So it's important to know that last round. Just an interesting thing that emerges from game theory. But these two strategies are what you need to know for this class as far as what will get cooperation in that last round. So that's Oligopoly in a nutshell, or in 5 videos.